Hi everyone, I'm Jack from Rack and I hope you're doing well. I want to continue the library tour with a pre-modern look at the modern library. So these are going to be all hardcovers, many of which have those cool sort of brown paper bag dust jackets. But we'll kick off with Plutarch's Lives. This is an amazing work. It's a monstrous work of scholarship, biography, and really of ethics, because that's a critical piece that's missed when Plutarch's Lives are taken and constricted down to be the rise of Rome or the golden age of Athens, you know, the early Roman Empire, things like that. Those editions miss the comparisons that Plutarch wanted to draw. So he's not just giving biographies of different Greek and Roman personalities. He then wants to give a comparison between them. So we have Theseus and Romulus, and then the comparison of Romulus with Theseus. Pericles and Fabius, the comparison of Fabius with Pericles. Alcibiades and Coriolanus, perfect one to compare there. And it goes on. And so those comparison essays that exist after the Greek and Roman lives are a really critical part of what makes Plutarch's Lives so special. He has an ethical bent, and maybe some people aren't interested in that or feel like it's moralizing or something, but I find those portions to be very illuminating at times. But this is just a fantastic work. It is the Dryden translation. I use air quotes because Dryden was involved in the translation. He helped oversee parts of it. Definitely his name was going to sell the most copies, so that's what we have it as. But this is a really cool work. And I know plenty of people heard of Plutarch's Lives. It should be noted that Plutarch is not writing these in the moment. He doesn't really know the individuals he's writing these historical biographies of. This is often years later. However, he does have access to great scholarship, great notes, libraries that have since been lost. We'll move on to another pre-modern work, the Stoic and Epicurean Philosophers. This is one of those modern library giants. So we have the extant writings of Epicurus, Epictetus, Lucretius, and Marcus Aurelius. So this, of course, has the Meditations. It also, thankfully, has De Rerum Natura, On the Nature of Things from Lucretius. It is a prose translation, not poetic, but it's still very effective. The concept of swerve is present. I really, really enjoy the different aphorisms, letters that we have from Epicurus. And then Epictetus is a really interesting, companion, precursor, influence on Stoicism. So this is a cool one. That was continued as sort of this sequence they had that had philosophy or key thinkers from ancient Greece and Rome. There's one from India and China. There's one, which I don't have a copy of. There's one from Judaism. There's one from the wisdom of the Catholic Church or something like that. And then there's this Great Voices of the Reformation. And this is a really interesting volume for people who are interested in the sort of the Protestant Reformation and the aftermath of it. So individuals like John Wycliffe, Martin Luther are represented. Other contemporaries or near contemporaries, Philip Melanchthon, Zwingli, John Calvin, John Knox, on to Cotton Mather, Roger Williams, George Fox, and then ultimately John Wesley. So this is kind of a really good volume if you're interested in that type of thinking or that history and want to get your hands on some primary sources. Then we have the English Philosophers from Bacon to Mill. It's Francis, not Roger. But of course, there's 13 essays in this one, but we have Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, George Berkeley, David Hume, John Gay, Jeremy Bentham, James Mill, and John Stuart Mill. This is a good one. This has some works from, it has the Novum Organum, a response to the Organon to a certain extent from Aristotle, from Bacon. Strong, about 100 pages from Leviathan from Hobbes. The essay concerning human understanding, and essay concerning true original extent and end of civil government by Locke. Essay concerning human understanding is abridged. David Hume's inquiry concerning human understanding and dialogues concerning natural religion. Government from James Mill, utilitarianism, and on liberty from John Stuart Mill. So again, if you're really interested. We'll move over to those were modern. So another modern work would be The Origin of Species and the Descent of Man from Charles Darwin. Very readable, I should add. And then William Prescott's History of the Conquest of Mexico and History of the Conquest of Peru. This is an important historical work, but it's very important to note that it is from a very specific perspective. conquest could be replaced by all sorts of nouns, and I think it would be just as appropriate. There is a chapter in the history of the conquest of Peru where Prescott does go into detail around what he calls abuses of the conquistadors. That might have almost been a perfect just retitle for the whole volume. In some ways, these are some of the histories that are all we have of what happened during that time period, in part because Prescott went back and translated different works into English or used other sources that were written from Spain to be able to write these. But it certainly presents one side of what was going on there in the 15th and 16th century. Moving on, we have the medieval epics. Beowulf, the Song of Roland, the Nibelungenlied, and the Cid. What is Beowulf, if not Old English persevering? Comment if you get the reference. Song of Roland, propaganda as poetry. The Nibelungenlied is fascinating, although the Saga of the Volsungs, I think, manages to pack just as strong a punch in a third of the length at times. And then the Cid, El Cid Campeador. We also have, let's see, Great Tales of the Terror and the Supernatural. And there's a huge, if you ever see this one, this is a great volume of just short stories. And there's excellent stories in here. The supernatural ones, a lot of them are horror. So we have Edgar Allan Poe, Wilkie Collins, Henry James, Guy de Maupassant, O. Henry, Rudyard Kipling, H.G. Wells, Algernon Blackwood, Out of the Deep from Walter de la Mare, Isaac Dinesen, H.P. Lovecraft, Dorothy Sayers, Hemingway's The Killer. So that's important to notice that there are writers like Hemingway in here, Saki, although it's the open window from Saki, Faulkner's Rose for Emily, Geoffrey Household's Taboo. There's Lion and Jim versus the Ants from Carl Stevenson, The Most Dangerous Game from Richard Connell. So some of the tales of terror aren't really about horror stories or supernatural things happening. They're almost like thrilling short stories. I want to say Stephen Crane's The Open Boat might be in here. So this is just a great volume of quality short fiction. The Decline of the West, an abridged edition by Oswald Spengler. The Varieties of Religious Experiences by William James. I did a video on this. I will link it in the description box. This is an interesting work in that William James seems to be willing to focus on sort of spiritualism rather than religious experiences, what I think we would regard as like spiritual experiences rather than organized religious experiences. And so to see his sort of psychological, sociological perspective on that is really interesting. The way he wants to explore it without condemning everyone. So this was an interesting work. I was surprised, honestly, when I read it. And it was more engaging than his brother's novels. Selected Stories of Franz Kafka. There are many of these volumes out there. I found this one at a cherry sale many years ago and I've just kept it. It has all the major ones in The Penal Colony, The Hunger Artist, The Hunter Gracchus, The Great Wall of China, The Metamorphosis. Great stories. Penguin Island from Anatole, France. An allegory, a satire, an interesting work. Be curious to know if how many folks have heard of this or have read it. Another pre-modern work, The Canterbury Tales from Geoffrey Chaucer, and I have this edition specifically because it's in Chaucer's Middle English, and it's just really fun to get into that, to read it, and I love these tales, these stories. They're wonderful, and the personalities that exist among the tellers of the tales and the way they interact with each other really makes it a wonderful work in my reading. Though a couple of the tales are just absolutely vicious. One of my favorite books, Possession, a Romance from A.S. Byatt. It's like the movie tie-in edition. But it has an interesting introduction from Byatt in which she talks about her concept of the title possession. Like, does a critic or a reader or a writer possess characters or possess the subject of biography? And she explored that later in the biographer's tale. But Possession is, I think, my favorite work from her. The pastiches of Victorian fairy tales, poetry, the letters, all of it combines to just create a really like thought-provoking novel. And then Them from Joyce Carol Oates. This is, I think, probably her strongest novel. Although if I read Blonde and enjoy it more, I'll come back and amend that with a comment. But this is an interesting work, and I think it's probably the one that we will still be reading when like my daughters are late in their lives, and readers will still be approaching this novel. So let me know what you think, and hope everybody's doing well. Thanks.